We've got Neelkanth Mishra to talk about markets, economy, numbers, and the real inside story. This budget has made sure that you don't have to work too much. It was very clear and evident in terms of what it wants to project.
Exactly. And it was entirely as expected. The only surprise was that they found that room for that 1 lakh crore of tax cuts. But otherwise, the numbers were almost exactly as people expected.
Cheers for the budget or three cheers for the budget? Or just cheers?
Cheers is because, I think we overemphasize, and you and I have been discussing this for 15 years. I think the role of the budget in deciding the future for the economy and the markets is actually been shrinking over the years. And I would rather, so the big change now is the start of the trade wars and the impact and the uncertainty it creates is actually quite significant.
Let's talk about the numbers here. The budget estimates, while they are clear in terms of where the fiscal deficit is moving, conservative and effective, what about the revenue assumptions? The hallmark of Nirmala Sitharaman budget they have been conservative in the revenue assumptions. For the first time, direct tax collection in economy which is slowing down seems to be in mid-teens. Is that achievable or is that optimistic?
Actually, see, it's not even mid-teens. If you add back that 1 lakh crores of tax cuts, then the underlying taxes are expected to grow at 22% year on year. There is a 70% growth assumed in STT, so there are many underlying drivers. But so we can nitpick. See, the point is that the trend has been very different from what we were used to. Between 2001 and 2019, the personal income tax as a percentage of GDP was rising at about 5 basis points a year. Since then, it has been rising at about 20 basis points a year, and the growth this year has been quite spectacular. So one can nitpick and say that maybe there is, given that capital gains taxes will be slower, that there's been a slowdown in market volumes, and therefore the STT volume may not grow. So they have been growing at a very rapid pace over the past 3 years, but that they may slow down a bit. So maybe there is a 30,000-40,000 crore slippage that could emerge there. But given that the nominal GDP growth of 10.1%, very reasonable assumptions on GST, on customs, etc., it suggests to me that at least the numbers, if the global economy goes into a recession because of the start of the trade war, then all bets are off. But on a steady state basis, I think there is enough slack and there is enough conservativeness in the budget estimates.
Big talking point is that has the government pivoted? Like in 2001, they pivoted towards capex. I distinctly remember, and I'm expanding this question for the benefit of our viewers, government came out and said that we will start building India. Now, have they pivoted from build India to consume India?
I don't think so. The state governments definitely have. The state governments are, I think, responding to the rising inequality by one after another announcing income transfer schemes. And, maybe when the Bihar budget is announced in anticipation of the elections later this year, you may see that again. Maybe UP will announce it next year. But for the central government, the way to interpret the shift that has happened is that comparing FY19 to FY26, everything on a percentage of GDP basis, you realize that most the trends, see, and the important thing is that FY26, the primary deficit, which is fiscal deficit minus the interest cost, is about 0.8% of GDP. It was 0.4% of GDP in FY19. So the COVID impact on the run rate of fiscal deficit is actually almost now eroded. So therefore, it makes sense to compare FY19 and 26. There are minor tweaks here and there, but the big change is that your personal income tax as percentage of GDP has gone up, and the capex as a percentage of GDP has gone up. So there was this transfer happening. So as the tax compliance improved, it was being invested in capex. Now, that model is likely running out because the government is running out of areas to spend on. And this is something that most people don't seem to appreciate. that under the constitutional separation of powers, the central government can only do national highways, railways, telecom, defense, major ports, and airports. So these are the 6 major areas where the government can spend. The rest, it has to work with the state governments through central sponsored schemes. If you just start transferring without any conditions, the risk is that the money could get wasted. We saw that in FY25. So we saw that out of the 11.1 trillion rupees, 11.1 lakh crores, only 9 lakh crores was what the government could potentially directly control. 2.1 lakh crores was included 1.5 lakh crores of interest-free loan to states for capex, and about 64,000 crores was stuff that the government, I think, was trying to keep aside in case there was additional demand later in the year. So there is a problem of scope. How much more can you spend? Maybe there is some more scope to spend on railways. Now, if this is the model and you do not want to consolidate faster, you shouldn't be consolidating faster because then the economy slows down and the lower equilibrium and debt to GDP starts to get hit. And therefore, you still need to spend this money. And I think the decision to give a tax cut was perhaps that if all the additional taxes are coming from this segment, just give some back so that at least the overall impact on the economy is not that negative. That's the way I interpret this. Now, the fact that it is concentrated in the maybe 70, 75 lakh people who actually pay taxes and disclose incomes in the 12 to 50 lakh bracket is just an outcome. But I think the underlying design was that there's no scope to spend more on capex. And then how do you keep the spending up without distorting the economy? Might as well give it back to the people who are paying more taxes. I think that's the approach here that has been taken.
Okay. Now let's look at this entire 1 lakh crore which comes back into the system. That's a very smart number. How will that impact the multiplier in the economy? And where will that 1 lakh crore go? Will it be again soap, shampoos or biscuits? Could it be travel tourism? Could it be something different? Or could it pure go in terms of leverage and credit card debt, etc., etc.?
See, that's the most important question. The 12 lakh to 50 lakh bracket. See, 70% of this 1 lakh crores will go into the people reporting incomes between 12 lakh and 50 lakh. Now, that's in our estimate based on FY23 data. There was about 58 lakh people who reported that much to the tax authorities in FY23. Let's assume that number has grown, the economy has grown in nominal terms. So maybe there are 70, 75 lakh people. And these are people who account for the top 10% of the population, right, in terms of incomes. And therefore, the likelihood is that incremental consumption will be more discretionary than staple. So not more biscuits. That's more, the 60th, 70th, 50th percentile, 40th percentile, not 90th percentile. So the likelihood of this being spent on discretionary items, the likelihood that some amount gets saved is also very high, given that most of the financial savings also come from this segment. So this segment is naturally prone to saving more. It is also a segment which is also very financially savvy. And then taking, vehicle loans or real estate loans, and therefore the impact of whatever 70, 80,000 crores post savings that is remaining, that getting a multiplier because these folks can actually take loans to buy a house or a car. Therefore, the impact on demand can be quite meaningful. Now, the bigger questions are: will this lead to a rise in the current account deficit? Will this lead to a push to inflation? I think the answer to that is very clear and no, because at an aggregate level, the government is still bringing down the fiscal deficit. So in a way, whatever extra was coming in through better compliance is being handed over as kind of a reward to the taxpayers who have been supporting this boost in capex. So this gets concentrated in this 70, 75 lakh households and in a few segments, maybe like autos, jewelry, some more, clothing or travel or, stuff like that.
Do you think there needs to be that additional fill-up now, come next week, or rather this week actually, from the central bank? And would we finally see some rate easing coming in?
That is, after the trade wars, the most important question for the markets and the economy. The economy is clearly slowed, and there are three ways that you can manage the cyclical aspects of the economy. The first is, of course, fiscal, where, as we discussed, there's not much room. Going forward, there'll be slightly more room because the pace of consolidation is easing, but this year there was not much room. Then you come to the monetary side. Now, in monetary, there is the cost of money and there is the quantity of money. There is a lot of obsession with the cost of money, whether interest rates fall by 25 basis points or not. In my view, given how inflation has behaved, given how the diffusion aspects of inflation have behaved, in the sense that the number of items with more than 6% inflation has actually gone up in December, and that we may see a sequential decline. We have seen a sequential decline pricing in January, but it's very hard to say that this will stick. And therefore, as before inflation becomes sticky, should the RBI be really cutting? So I think it's a toss of a coin. I know the Overton window has shifted, meaning Overton window, meaning the consensus view, given that everyone expects a rate cut, the costs of cutting rates and distorting markets is therefore reduces a bit. Therefore, it makes the RBI job easier. Though if one was prescribing, it would not be very wise to be cutting this week. Then we come to the quantity of money. And there, I think there is a lot of scope for action. So there is 5 lakh crores of liquidity, which has been sucked out because of foreign currency interventions. When the RBI sold dollars and bought rupees, they've replenished about 1 lakh crores of that on last Monday. There's been a bit of a CRR cut, but that takes time to sort of flow through the system. I think for the economy to revive from here, we have to find ways of getting credit growth back up from about 11% to say 14, 15%. One shouldn't be trying to target like China level of credit growth, but it is reasonable to expect that if the credit growth in the economy goes from 17 to 11, the economy obviously slows. So are there ways that the RBI can act, say, by maybe reducing the emphasis on the credit deposit ratios that it imposed on some private banks, by using macroprudential weights, risk weights on certain types of loans, which can be brought down, say, for example, for housing, for mortgages, where the real estate cycle is at a decent place, the risk of home loans going bad is lower right now. So why not try to push some credit through that channel? Now, once that starts to pick up, the liquidity creation starts happening through the bank loans themselves. As banks give loans, they create deposits. So I think the quantity side and credit growth side is where a lot more action is perhaps necessary. And once that comes through, I think the economy will see a bit of a rebound.